So anyway, guys, thank you for allowing me to kind of break into your G3 meeting. It's not very often that we have all of you in the same room, so I'm just going to take advantage of it. You guys all remember when you started out as an account executive for Gordon Flesch. You remember the fear and the apprehension, and I get these questions of, what does it take to be a successful account executive? And so I kind of thought this would be a great opportunity because you guys are obviously very passionate about the organization. And so anyone who's going to deliver that message about what it takes is these people that have done it. So I think one of the things I always start out with is we've built a great culture here, and I try to start out with that. And I think, Patrick, would that be a good place to start, would be the culture?
Sure. I think culture in any sales organization is pivotal to the success of a company and that individual. If they fit into that that particular branch or team, is a big factor to building those relationships. I mean, you want each branch to have a supportive team atmosphere so that you're helping each other through challenges, through deals, and I think we've created that at Gordon Flesch, or done a pretty good job of getting there. In most of our branches, I think each player wants to see the other one succeed and help each other get there. So that's great. But ultimately, there's a real individual aspect to this job and to this business as well. There's a lot of work you have to do behind the scenes, at night or alone out in your territory, that you need to take it upon yourself to accept that responsibility and put in the hard work. But certainly we hope to surround you with great resources, from management to business analysts, so subject matter specialists. I mean, this is a complicated industry, so we've got to have a team approach in the market, selling to customers, so that they also know that we have a team of people supporting them as an account. So certainly there's both aspects, but team and culture are very significant to the success.
And that's you use the term, you got player in there and team and individual sports. So I guess you can probably hear the sports analogies. And I think when we have a lot of new hires asking that question is, what does it take? We oftentimes, all four of us, I think, really always fall back to sports. We talk about swimming or or training or team sport versus individual sport. But if they're going to be successful, I think have to have just a passion for the competitiveness of this. It isn't just an individual sport. There is definitely that team, but you've got to do the day-to-day stuff like just in any other sport, to be successful. We think a lot of times about endurance sports versus sprint. So this is not a sprint. People come on board and they think I'm going to make a lot of money right away, or I'm going to do really well right away. And sometimes you get lucky in the short term, but in the long term, it's an endurance event. It really is. And I think the more they think of it long term and do long term things, the better their chances versus just kind of playing for the short term.
Yeah. Do you think that there's particular character traits that need to be present within an account executive or someone who's coming into this role?
I do, and you guys can jump in too. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, Patrick, you just said the discipline. So there's got to be discipline. There's got to be passion. Mm-hmm. If they're passionate but they're not disciplined, it's just kind of they're all over the place. So they've got to be able to take that passion and, I think, kind of channel it down onto whatever it is that they're working at. But those are critical, and I think there's also got to be kind of a strong desire to help people, because you're really trying to help customers get from one place to another. There's probably other character traits.
Well, to that point of discipline, I've always said that if you're going to be successful here, you have to establish good habits, and then you have to be disciplined about maintaining those habits. So things are going to change. You have to adapt over time. Industries change, technology changes. You got to keep your talk tracks and everything fresh. But at its core, find out what works for you and stick with it. So establish good habit and then good routines. Good organization, whatever it is that works for you, and then be disciplined about continuing it. Because there's so much freedom with this job and so many things that can get in the way. If you don't stick to what helps you be successful, then you get on the wrong track.
No, and I'm glad that's a great lead into one of my other questions that I get. A lot of these account executives, developing new customers is big in all of our markets. I mean, that's a big priority, right? Mm-hmm. But several of my new account executives are coming into emerging markets. I mean, you have an emerging market and you have an emerging market, both in your region. And, what kind of advice or consult would you give to those that are coming into an emerging market as far as their habits and what do they need to do?
we call that farming, which is a really important part of our job. You have to meet regularly with your customers, but not just simply meeting with them, you have to add value. So gone are the days of just taking your customer out to lunch and being buddies with them. That's not good enough anymore. Our customers want more, they need more. We're consultants to their business. So when you meet with them, you need to come with ideas, strategies, things that are going to help their businesses improve, or else they're not going to take the meeting the next time you ask to get in front of them. So when you have an opportunity for your customer, you have to understand their business, find out what's changed within their business, how technology is affecting their industry, and come to the table with some ideas, add value in some way. Don't just meet just to meet.
So that's, maintaining that existing customer base, you hit it on the head. You've got to bring value to those conversations. If you're in an emerging market and you don't have the luxury of having that lease base or that customer base to feed off of, it's a whole different world.
That's where the tenacity word that we talk
You got
about.
to be tenacious. That's a great word for it.
Kicked around all the time.
You got to have a plan. To Mark's point earlier, plan your day, stick to that plan. That's the only way you're gonna, be able to be successful in a lot of these emerging markets. You're canvassing a territory. You're not calling on a list of accounts. You're responsible for 5 or 6 zip codes. So you've got to be strategic on how you spend your time in those different areas. And one tip I got from Tom Flesh when I first started was like on your lunch hour, for example, drive your territory. Just drive through, get your sandwich, sit in the car and just drive through and just look around, and get an idea for what business parks, what areas have more commerce than others, and focus your time on those heavily populated areas. That's where the action is, that's where decisions are being made. And that was one thing that stuck with me that I used in Oak Brook when I first started. And really quickly, I got a good feel for all of my different towns. Just that simple exercise.
Driving around.
I used to do the same thing. I just drove and ate a sandwich. Got to know my whole territory.
So you must have got the same advice on how that
I
happened.
think I did.
That's possibly good.
Speaking of advice, I'm sorry, did you want
I was just going to add something to that, if that's okay.
You go right ahead.
Whether it's an emerging market where we don't have a lot of customer bases or it's an emerging offering, like with managed IT services, I think the key to be successful is that if you try a few times and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that it's not a good solution or that it's not something we can sell. We have to kind of stay at it. You've got to keep getting into the cage and swinging at pitches until you work out of the slump or you get your swing down. And if it isn't working, maybe there's a slight tweak that needs to be made to that approach to have some different results. And I think in an emerging market or an emerging product, we get no's more often than we're getting yeses. And we've got to figure out a way to change that. Part of it's volume, but part of it's some introspection to understand what things could be adjusted to get a different outcome.
So I was going to say that as far as advice, I know in your orientation presentation, at the end, you always encourage them to use their resources. Talk about the culture and the resources that we have. And I think all too often that they feel like they don't want to be a burden on their fellow account executives or their BAs or their sales managers. And I don't know how to get them over that hump because a lot of times I'll follow up with them and they'll have questions and I'll say, well, ask such and such, and they don't want to be a burden. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that one thing that everybody needs to understand is the organization has invested heavily, significantly in resources to help account executives be as successful as possible and help our customers have the right solution. What is our ratio? 3 sales reps to every support resource, or
Something like
maybe
that.
even a little better than that.
If you add all into the consulting group and you add that group and the BAs.
And the sales coordinators and all the
Sales
people
managers,
whose
yeah.
role is really there to help support the efforts that the account executives have in front of them and the challenges they have in front of them. Those resources aren't there to be put on a shelf and looked at. They're there to be utilized and to help drive efforts. Of course, we also want account executives to become as self-sufficient as they can and not have to rely on resources for every conversation. But especially early on or something that they're not as accustomed to, those resources are absolutely there for their improvement and their utilization to drive our solutions.
And they are not a burden.
No.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when I talk to folks that come here from competitors in our industry or just other, companies in our industry, they don't come from that world. They've had to do it as a one-man show or one-woman show, so to speak, so that they're, selling the product, they're dealing with the technical aspects of the proposal of the solution. Sometimes they're helping with implementation, training, end users. We try to take as much of that off of their plate as possible and give them the resources to sell the solution in the field. So I think a lot of times they're trying to get accustomed to this new way of working. But I just encourage our management team to be as forthcoming with our new hires to encourage them to take business analysts out to their customers and in the territory. I mean,
And when you bring that business analyst out on that meeting, don't tune out. Listen to what they say, listen to the questions that they ask the customer, listen to the talk tracks that they have. Learn from them as much as you can when you're out there so that you can accomplish more when you're without them in front of a customer. It just helps you improve your skills as well.
Another thing I would encourage them to be mindful of is that the more resources that the customer sees, the more the customer understands that we have more than just a salesman. It's not, even if the account executive can answer all the questions, the fact that we have resources means that we're invested in the customer's success. So sometimes just showing the customer that we have those resources adds to the value of the solution that we're bringing to the table.
Well, it's just more people for them to build a relationship with.
Right.
You can build a relationship with the account executive and the BA and the sales manager, and that just kind of embeds them into the relationship as customer,
But I think,
more than a
Pat,
vendor.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I think Patrick brings up a good point earlier when you're talking about some people just maybe are not used to that. They didn't come from an organization where there was that level of support. And so they might either have, I won't call them bad habits, but just the habit of trying to go alone. And they're just not used to that. So I mean, if you get new hires in that have had more experience and you get a question from them, that question that needs to be answered maybe a little differently than from somebody that's brand new, maybe even to sales. And they're probably not going to hesitate to call in the resources as much as somebody who maybe has either got burned or just wasn't used to that environment before.
It's interesting because I have had a few of them say that they have had resources, but the red tape they have to go through in order to get to those resources, or the amount of time it takes to get the answer back, that there's not really a sense of urgency. And I think that's one thing that we would all agree on, that everyone in this
That's a
room
good
and
point.
outside this room has a sense of urgency to help them get to whatever they need for the customer. So that's very different, I think, for some people. We don't have that red tape.
I'm always amazed with our business analyst team. I mean, they're smart, they're competent, they're technical, but customers relate to them. They're sort of disarming sometimes, I think, in the sales process from the buyer's perspective, because that's not the salesperson. That's the business analyst who really knows the product. So they tend to form a unique relationship with the customer, and that's something to take advantage of as an account executive. But they're some of our most valuable people that help drive revenue and drive solutions that matter for our customers. So take advantage, use and abuse those folks. They're great people.
Yeah.
I don't know how often you get this, Denise, at all, especially now, and I think, if you talk about what we did when we were starting, it was very different, and there was not, the laptop and everything else. And so maybe another suggestion or recommendation to people just starting out is to not let this technology get between them and their clients. And they have to use it as a tool, but I think in some cases, where we've seen people have a challenge is that they use this to insulate them from their clients. Everything is electronic, and they back away a little bit from maybe some of that face-to-face that could be so critical. So I think they've got to be a little bit more bold about trying to see people face-to-face, in person, rather than everything being electronic.
Good point.
It's easy, but I don't know that's as effective.
They hide behind it.
They kind of hide behind it. It's a little safer to be
And
behind
I
that laptop.
100% agree with that, but sometimes that's what the customer demands.
Yeah.
So you have to give it to them if that's what they
Right,
want.
you gotta find that mix, but for those that, and again, sometimes people say, I'll just email it to me, but once in a while, you still,
Let's get in front of
you gotta get in front as best you can and try to break that habit.
So since you opened up the floodgates, Kelly, I'm going to ask you, we haven't worked together very long, but I have come to know you as a man who doesn't leave a lot to chance. And I have to assume that you've been
Gosh,
successful.
I'm not sure what that means, but.
Everything is, I assume that every day is planned out and every win is planned out, how you're going to get there. I assume that's how you became very successful as an account executive, which led you to where you are today. How did you do that as an account executive? Why do you think that doing that or being very strategic and planning helps you kind of getting where you are?
I think it's exactly as Mark was saying, easier. I mean, it's just that discipline. Patrick, you talk about working that plan. I mean, it was just laying it out every day, because early on, especially, it was at the time for me, it was an emerging market and an emerging product. So you didn't get a lot of yeses. You didn't get a lot of doors opening. So you didn't get a lot of days where you'd have sales. You had big spaces between them. So you had to have something that kept you going. And little victories were, I covered this street or this zip code or this office park. That was the victory, because you maybe didn't get to see anybody or have any sale opportunities. So for me, it was, if that was my plan for the day, just having the discipline every day to just stay at that. Because somebody told me if I did that, it would work. So I just had to trust it.
Yeah.
And you just kind of like a coach on a team says, if you do it this way, you'll get faster or you'll get stronger. Then you just got to do it, whether you like to or not.
Yeah.
One thing I used to do similar to that is I used to set goals for myself. So obviously you want to close deals, you want to get commission, and those are important. But sometimes, especially if you're just starting out, there can be little victories. So if you say that this week I'm going to have X amount of cold calls, or I'm going to schedule X amount of appointments, just small victories that at the end of the day on Friday when you go home, if maybe you didn't close a sale, but you accomplished the goal that you set for yourself.
Exactly.
It helps motivate you to get back and do the grind next week because you did something that you set out to do. So setting small attainable goals for yourself, I used to do a little bit of that. That used to kind of keep me motivated, keep me, especially when I was just starting. I also used Friday afternoons to plan out my week and schedule my week. So I would block time for prospecting. So maybe it was Tuesday afternoon from 2 to 4 I was going to prospect. Now if a customer wanted to meet with me, I would, of course, meet with them during that time frame. But if nothing else was going on, it forced me, it held me accountable that from 2 to 4 on Tuesday, I would prospect.
You had to prioritize.
So if you set that up on Friday, you plan out your week that way, it helps you stick to that schedule.
So, we talk about, we develop a sales team in each one of our branches, and then all the branches together we consider it a sales team, right? So is sales a team or is it an individual sport? It sounds like it's both.
Yeah, I think I sort of touched on that earlier. When I think about that, I actually think about when I was growing up and I was younger kid and I was on the swim team. I'll never forget the coach. He looked at me after one meet and he said, swimming is one of those sports where you cannot hide. It's you, the pool, and the clock. And that's it. There's no one else to blame. And I'll never forget that. And I think that transfers, directly to the world of being a salesperson. You've got a lot of lonely moments. You've got months where you didn't hit your goals and you're in a slump, and you've got to really look inward into yourself and ask if you're doing everything possible, humanly possible to reach those goals and, be successful at your job. And if you're being honest with yourself and you're having a rough time, the answer is probably no, and there's more that you could do individually. But again, at Gordon Flesch, we try to surround you with great people and great tools to help aid those efforts. But really, you've got to focus on the hardest part of the sales cycle, which is the front 10%. So finding a prospective buyer, finding an opportunity, and developing that into an actual real sales opportunity. And then the back end, the 10% at the end of actually closing and asking for the business, those are the two hardest parts. All the fun and the sexiness, quote unquote, happens in the middle. So it's definitely a combination of both.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is going to be, I think I have a better approach to go back and kind of set this up for the account executives. Is there any last minute
Well,
advice
just,
or
if I
comment
could,
on
just
it?
one more, because I agree so much with the other side, that whole coin of the individual side is, even though you were that single person in that pool lane, you had other members of that same swim team that you were trying to win as a team. And in this case, sometimes people don't think of this as a team sport, but it is, because if I'm not doing all that individual stuff to make my territory strong, hitting my numbers, hitting my quota, doing those things, then I'm helping competition get stronger, which then hurts other people on my team. So when I beg off, if I don't do my job, I'm empowering the competition to get stronger, and I just hurt my team. So that there is a
That's
team
a really
element to
good
this
point.
thing, as well as recharging the batteries when you get back and being constructive and not looking at the negative side of everything. So it's a perfect analogy to a sport. It really is.
I would agree. Anything else from? Thank you,
No, well,
gentlemen.
thanks.
I'll let you get back to your
Thanks.
G3 meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.